The atmosphere on the set buzzed with activity, cameras positioned strategically, lighting equipment being adjusted, and crew members exchanging hushed conversations. What should have been a routine filming session, another scene to capture, another take to perfect, had transformed into something entirely different. Margot Robbie sensed the unusual tension the instant she arrived on set. The environment was charged with a palpable anxiety that settled heavily in one's chest, refusing to dissipate. At the epicenter of this discomfort stood Oliver Smith, a director renowned for his brilliant vision but equally infamous for his ruthless methodologies. As filming commenced, the pressure intensified, veiled insults, patronizing comments, calculated public humiliation in front of the entire production team. Just when Oliver prepared to launch another verbal assault, the studio door swung open. Leonardo DiCaprio entered the space, and with a single glance, he comprehended the situation completely. Because today's genuine conflict wouldn't unfold before the cameras. It would transpire behind them, and by day's end, someone would forfeit everything. Before continuing with this narrative, we'd appreciate knowing your location. Should you find these stories engaging, please subscribe to our channel as we have another compelling narrative scheduled for tomorrow. The set hummed with constant motion, a complex choreography of technicians adjusting lighting equipment, cameras being positioned, and last-minute script revisions. Margot Robbie inhaled deeply while examining her reflection in her trailer's mirror. Today's filming would be challenging, although she was well acquainted with emotionally demanding performances that had established her professional reputation. Yet something about today carried additional weight, perhaps the scene's intensity or perhaps the director, Oliver Smith, a meticulous visionary who exhibited zero tolerance for anything less than perfection. Upon entering the set, Margot immediately detected the thick tension permeating the air. The upcoming scene represented a crucial moment in the film, depicting profound suffering and resilience, the kind of sequence that would define her character. She understood precisely what was required. The cameras stood ready, crew members positioned at their stations, awaiting Oliver's signal. Then, action. Margot immersed herself completely in the scene, her voice authentic, emotions flowing through every syllable. The gravitas of her performance lingered in the air as she delivered her concluding line. Then, silence, followed by Oliver's voice. Cut. Margot released a slow breath, anticipating feedback, but instead of technical notes or constructive criticism, Oliver emitted a soft, disparaging laugh. It wasn't amusement but disappointment. Is that all you've got? The entire crew froze. Oliver rose from his director's chair, moving deliberately toward the set. Margot turned to face him, her heart racing. She had collaborated with demanding directors previously, but something about Oliver's approach always felt particularly cutting, designed specifically to undermine confidence. Let's attempt that again, he stated, his tone increasingly sharp, and this time, perform as though you actually care. Margot's stomach contracted uncomfortably. With sufficient industry experience to handle criticism, there was something particularly disturbing about Oliver's delivery. Loud enough for everyone to hear, saturated with condescension. She clenched her fists beyond the camera's view, refusing to provide him the satisfaction of witnessing her reaction, focusing solely on the performance. The cameras rolled once more. Margot delivered the scene with heightened intensity and greater control. She recognized the quality of her performance, felt its authenticity, but the moment her final word was uttered, Oliver stood again, and then, projecting his voice across the entire set. Wow, has our leading lady finally lost her brilliance? Scattered laughter emerged from a few crew members. Most remained silent, glancing uncomfortably at one another. Margot experienced a familiar sharp pain rising in her chest. The insult itself wasn't the issue, but rather his delivery. A provocative test, and most disturbingly, he actively sought to break her composure. Margot maintained absolute stillness, refusing any visible reaction, though internally, something fractured. Whether anger or self-doubt remained unclear, but one certainty emerged. This transcended criticism of a single performance. this concerned basic respect. As silence extended across the set, one thought dominated her consciousness. Was she alone in her perception of this situation? The set maintained an eerie silence following Oliver's comment. Margot Robbie held her position steadfastly, though internally, she battled a growing sense of humiliation and frustration. Her extensive industry experience had exposed her to harsh directors, impossible standards, and exhausting production schedules. However, a fundamental difference existed between challenging an actor to achieve their best performance and publicly undermining them. And Oliver Smith apparently failed to recognize this distinction. Margot exhaled deliberately, maintaining a neutral expression, determined to conceal any indication that his words had achieved their intended effect. Surveying the crew members' faces, she realized a critical fact: everyone had witnessed the exchange. Some lowered their heads, focusing intently on their equipment. Others shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, while a few displayed subtle smirks. Crew members who had worked with Oliver long enough to understand this behavior as standard. As expected. Because Oliver Smith's reputation extended beyond perfectionism. It encompassed bullying tactics, and absolutely no one challenged his authority. Margot clenched her jaw, attempting to suppress the emotional response rising in her throat. Her experience wasn't limited to novice roles. She had collaborated with internationally acclaimed directors. She had endured mentally and physically demanding roles. Yet something about this particular moment, being demeaned before an entire production team as though worthless, felt uniquely distressing, and worse, self-doubt began infiltrating her thoughts. Perhaps her skills had diminished, perhaps Oliver's assessment was accurate, perhaps she genuinely had lost her professional edge. This consideration twisted her stomach uncomfortably. She briefly closed her eyes, forcibly rejecting these negative thoughts. No, she recognized her talent, understood her professional value. And she refused to allow one individual's arrogance to undermine that self-knowledge. Oliver clapped his hands, disrupting the silence. Very well, everyone, let's proceed with another take. Perhaps this time, our lead actress will actually deliver a performance. Margot inhaled sharply but offered a slight nod to the assistant director. She needed to persevere, complete the scene, definitively prove him wrong. The cameras activated, and she immersed herself completely in the character's emotional landscape, allowing the portrayed suffering to consume her. Her performance intensified, deepened, achieved authenticity, she could sense it, and upon delivering her final line, she felt its perfection, or believed she had. Oliver's voice shattered the moment abruptly. Cut. Margot looked up, breathless, hopeful. But Oliver merely shook his head, displaying a cold smirk. Still lacking something. Perhaps reviewing your previous films might help you remember how to act. Laughter followed, not universal, but sufficient to constrict her chest painfully. She forced herself to remain motionless, to maintain steady breathing. But internally, she was crumbling. An unspoken question permeated the atmosphere. Would anyone speak up? Would anyone confront Oliver? Crew members exchanged glances, some appearing ashamed, others visibly relieved they weren't currently targeted. And then, Oliver delivered his concluding strike, leaning back in his chair, folding his arms. Margot, darling, if your next performance doesn't improve, I'll need to consider replacement options. Understood? A cold sensation traveled down Margot's spine. She recognized the emptiness of the threat, her position as lead actress was secured. The studio specifically wanted her involvement, but the message remained clear: she was dispensable. And no one present would advocate for her, she stood completely alone. Or at least, that's what she believed, because at that precise moment, another individual entered the set. And for the first time that day, the power dynamics prepared to shift dramatically. As Margot attempted to regain composure, the studio door opened. She turned her head slightly, and that's when she noticed him. Leonardo DiCaprio. His presence projected calm authority. He quickly assessed the room, silently. And from the subtle furrow appearing in his brow, the conclusion was obvious. He immediately sensed the prevailing tension. And Margot instantly realized. Oliver Smith remained completely unaware of what would happen next. The tension on set had become suffocating, a tangible pressure in the environment. Margot maintained her downward gaze, fists clenched at her sides, battling against the humiliation burning intensely within her. Oliver Smith occupied his director's chair, satisfied, observing crew members hurrying to reset the scene. He had successfully established his dominance. His authority remained unchallenged. No one would dare question his methods. But as the soundstage door swung open, the room's power dynamics underwent an immediate transformation. Because observing quietly from the entrance stood Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo advanced slowly, his gaze methodically surveying the room. His extensive career had exposed him to countless production environments. He had worked under demanding directors, confronted intense pressure, and endured challenging productions. But this situation appeared distinctly different. The room's atmosphere felt fundamentally wrong, suggesting everyone navigated treacherous territory, as though the space had been completely depleted of oxygen the moment Oliver had spoken. And Margot's rigid posture, her unreadable expression, yet clearly restraining something, communicated everything necessary. Something problematic had occurred. Something was fundamentally wrong. Oliver finally registered Leonardo's presence. His smug expression flickered momentarily. Because Leonardo represented more than simply an actor, he was Leonardo DiCaprio, an industry veteran universally respected, including by individuals entirely outside the film industry. Oliver forced a casual smirk, rising from his chair. Well, the legendary presence himself. Leonardo's expression remained unchanged. Hey, Oliver. His voice projected calm steadiness. Yet beneath it lurked a subtle edge. Oliver gestured toward Margot. Your timing is perfect to witness your co-star performing, or attempting to, at least. Several crew members visibly tensed. Margot maintained her composure, but Leonardo, his eyes narrowed fractionally. A dangerous expression briefly crossed his features. The kind of look that compelled people to reconsider their words before speaking. Oliver failed to notice, or worse, deliberately disregarded it. He clapped his hands, addressing the production team. All right, let's reset. I expect an improved performance this time. Then, looking at Margot with exaggerated encouragement. Unless you believe you require a break. The statement constituted a challenge, a provocation. And before Margot could respond, Leonardo interjected. Perhaps we should pause briefly. The set fell completely silent. Oliver turned his head, his smirk faltering slightly. Excuse me? Leonardo's gaze remained fixed on him. A break. You've been repeatedly running this scene without interruption. I believe everyone would benefit from a brief pause. Oliver emitted a short, amused laugh. We lack that luxury. We're already behind schedule. Leonardo tilted his head marginally. Then perhaps pushing people to their breaking point represents an ineffective strategy. Several crew members exchanged meaningful glances. The statement wasn't delivered forcefully. It didn't constitute a direct confrontation. But its implications sufficed. A fracture appeared in Oliver's previously unchallenged authority. Oliver's smile tightened visibly. I appreciate your concern, but I understand how to manage my production. Leonardo maintained unwavering eye contact. Really? A momentary pause. Then with perfectly measured delivery. Because from my observation, it appears more like you're systematically exhausting your team. The entire crew froze collectively. Margot's breath caught audibly. Leonardo maintained his normal speaking volume. He wasn't engaging in confrontation. But his speech carried unmistakable authority. A controlled defiance. And for the first time, Oliver Smith appeared genuinely unsettled. Oliver forced laughter, though his body language betrayed tension. He wasn't accustomed to having his decisions questioned, particularly before his entire production team. And now, Leonardo DiCaprio positioned himself between Oliver and his unchallenged control. And the question hanging unspoken in the air appeared unmistakable. Would Oliver genuinely challenge Leonardo's intervention? Or was he about to lose control over his own production? The set remained completely motionless. Every crew member held their breath as Leonardo DiCaprio and Oliver Smith maintained their visual standoff. No individual had ever openly challenged Oliver before his own team previously. And now, Leonardo had accomplished precisely that with calculated composure, no shouting, no dramatic display. Simply truth, and Oliver clearly resented it. Completely. Oliver forced a strained smile. The tension in his jaw barely concealed. "I appreciate your input, Leonardo." His voice calculated as one speaks when attempting to maintain authority. "However, let me clarify. I direct this production. Not you." Leonardo maintained his steady gaze. "Then demonstrate appropriate leadership." A wave of shock traveled through the assembled crew. Even Margot's composure momentarily faltered. Oliver's expression darkened noticeably. "I beg your pardon." Leonardo tilted his head slightly. "You believe demoralizing people enhances their performance." His tone remained measured, unwavering. "All I observe is a production team afraid to make the slightest error in your presence." Oliver's facial expression betrayed his agitation. "Are you aware how many productions I've successfully directed?" Leonardo acknowledged with a nod. "And how many participants completed those productions despising the entire process?" That observation struck deeply. Oliver visibly stiffened and for the first time appeared without immediate response. The silence extended uncomfortably, until Margot stepped forward. Her voice projected calm strength. "Leonardo's assessment is accurate." Oliver turned toward her, his eyes narrowing menacingly. "Margot," but she continued uninterrupted. "This production transcends merely creating the film. It concerns the individuals creating it." She surveyed the room, acknowledging both cast and crew. The people who had witnessed this confrontation in silence. "We all value this project, but that doesn't justify being treated as expendable." Several individuals nodded subtly, while others shifted uncomfortably. Because fundamentally, universal agreement existed. They had simply feared expressing it, until this moment. Oliver emitted a harsh laugh, shaking his head dismissively. "You two demonstrate remarkable presumption, believing you can simply arrive and dictate my professional methodology?" He turned, raising his voice noticeably. "Anyone objecting to my directorial approach may freely depart." Silence followed. But this silence differed from fearful compliance. It represented the quality of silence preceding a pivotal moment. Margot exchanged glances with Leonardo before returning her attention to Oliver. "Then I'll initiate the departure." "Margot, don't behave irrationally," she stepped backward decisively. "No film justifies sacrificing personal dignity. And no director deserves respect without reciprocating it." She addressed the crew directly. "Anyone else?" A momentary pause. Then an unexpected sound emerged. The assistant director deliberately placed down his clipboard. A camera operator stepped away from his equipment. The script supervisor crossed her arms and nodded affirmatively. Gradually, individuals began making their decision. A choice Oliver never anticipated they would exercise. Oliver's authority visibly deteriorated. And now, for the first time in his career, he wasn't issuing commands. The question remained, would he allow this moment to destroy his professional reputation? Or would he finally acknowledge he no longer maintained absolute power? Footsteps echoed across the soundstage as crew members deliberately moved away from their positions. Oliver Smith remained frozen in disbelief, witnessing the transformation unfolding before him. He had controlled numerous productions, convinced that intimidation and dominance represented the most effective methods for commanding respect. But now, his own team actively abandoned him. And most significantly, Leonardo and Margot had initiated this response. The movement wasn't universal. Some crew members maintained their positions, uncertain, unwilling to jeopardize their employment. Others exchanged meaningful glances, silent agreements, shared resentments finally surfacing. For years, they had endured Oliver's verbal abuse, his humiliating tactics, his cruelty disguised as artistic perfectionism. But now, they recognized their options. And that choice presented itself clearly: support Oliver, or advocate for fundamental respect. The first explicit voice of opposition came from a lighting technician named Brad, who had participated in dozens of productions prior to this one. He stepped forward, clearing his throat deliberately. "I've worked in this industry for 2 decades, and never encountered a director who made daily set arrival so thoroughly unpleasant. Until this production." His expression flashed with unmistakable anger. "Excuse me?" But Brad continued undeterred. "You push people beyond reasonable limits and label it directorial excellence. But your methodology exclusively involves breaking people down." Several others murmured agreement. Leonardo and Margot remained silent, observing as crew members discovered their collective voice. The assistant director, Lena, crossed her arms resolutely. "I've attempted to communicate this for months, Oliver. Your approach has become obsolete, and now you're witnessing the consequences." Oliver produced a harsh laugh, attempting to conceal his diminishing control. "So this constitutes rebellion? You collectively believe you can simply, what? Produce this film without my involvement?" No response followed. And that silence communicated more effectively than any verbal argument. Margot advanced a step, her voice unwavering. "No one suggests this production doesn't require directorial guidance, Oliver." Her gaze narrowed slightly. "We're indicating it doesn't specifically require your involvement." Oliver stared at her, his expression indecipherable. But internally he recognized the truth: he had exceeded acceptable boundaries. And for the first time in his professional career, he faced defeat. Margot squared her shoulders resolutely. "My statement remains unchanged. Without significant modifications, I withdraw from this project." Oliver's jaw visibly tensed. "You're contractually obligated." Leonardo finally interjected, his voice calm but reinforced with unmistakable authority. "And similarly, the studio maintains contractual obligations, granting them equivalent influence regarding subsequent decisions." And precisely at that moment, Oliver comprehended his situation. He no longer maintained exclusive control, because he didn't possess singular authority in this circumstance. And consequently, the decision transcended his individual authority. It rested with the studio, the producers, the individuals who had just witnessed their lead actress and essential crew members threaten collective departure. And surveying the assembled faces confronting him, he finally recognized the truth. He stood isolated. Silence descended upon the set as a production assistant hurriedly departed, undoubtedly rushing to inform executives about the recent developments. Oliver's hands formed tight fists, because for the first time throughout his career, his professional fate no longer remained under his control. And the upcoming meeting would determine whether his career itself remained viable. The studio conference room felt unusually cold, though perhaps that sensation merely reflected the tension permeating the atmosphere. Margot occupied a chair at the extensive table, arms crossed, her expression composed yet unreadable. Leonardo sat adjacent to her, characteristically calm and resolute, his presence representing a quiet but undeniable authority. Opposite them sat Oliver Smith, his previous smugness completely absent. The lead producer, Henry Davis, adjusted his glasses while reviewing several documents. He had received comprehensive information regarding the set incident, and now prepared to determine Oliver's professional future. Let's address this matter directly. Henry finally spoke, his tone sharp and businesslike. We confront a significant issue transcending mere scheduling delays. This concerns workplace conditions, production management methodology. Oliver emitted a sardonic chuckle, leaning back in his chair. Come now, Henry, is this truly necessary? I challenge my performers to extract optimal performances. This represents my established methodology, my consistent approach. Margot's expression remained unchanged, while Leonardo tilted his head marginally, his penetrating gaze never leaving Oliver. Henry dismissed the justification. That misrepresents the central issue, Oliver. He tapped his fingers against the tabletop, addressing him directly. The problem doesn't concern your directorial techniques, but rather your complete disregard for colleagues' professional dignity. Several executives nodded subtly, and Oliver, for the first time displayed visible anxiety. The assistant director contributed next. Oliver, your approach extends beyond challenging people. You deliberately demean them, publicly humiliating them before the entire production team, and for what purpose? Personal gratification from power? Oliver's jaw visibly tightened. Please, Margot maintains professional experience, she understands industry practices. Margot finally spoke, her voice calm but direct. Indeed, and I similarly recognize the distinction between demanding direction and toxic leadership. Oliver rolled his eyes dismissively. This represents excessive dramatics. Leonardo leaned forward slightly, his tone controlled but resolute. She doesn't stand alone in this assessment, Oliver. Oliver fell silent, comprehending Leonardo's implication. This situation transcended Margot's individual experience. It represented the entire crew finally expressing their collective concerns, and now, studio leadership actively listened. Henry sighed audibly, setting his documentation aside. Here's our current position, Oliver. This production cannot proceed within a hostile workplace environment. Period. The studio has invested substantial resources in this project, preventing its collapse over leadership conflicts. Oliver visibly tensed. Henry exchanged glances with fellow executives before delivering his conclusive statement. Specifically, either implement fundamental changes, or face replacement. These words landed with undeniable impact. For the first time Oliver appeared genuinely shaken. You can't possibly maintain seriousness. Henry remained unwavering. Completely serious. Margot and Leonardo observed as Oliver processed the reality confronting him. He could contest this decision and risk complete professional displacement, or acknowledge his misjudgment. Oliver scanned everyone present at the table, shifting from Henry to additional executives, then toward Margot. Finally toward Leonardo, and Leonardo's steady, unwavering, impenetrable return gaze initiated something fracturing within him. Oliver exhaled slowly, lowering his gaze toward the table. Then, what specific actions do you require? Margot raised an eyebrow, Leonardo maintained his position, and Henry displayed a slight smile. Because Oliver had essentially acknowledged defeat, though whether genuine behavioral transformation would follow remained uncertain. Oliver Smith occupied his chair in silence. For the first time throughout his professional career, he lacked controlling authority. Studio leadership had issued their directive. The cast and crew had confronted him directly, presenting two clear options: transform or depart. And Oliver Smith hadn't prepared to accept replacement. During a production break, Leonardo and Margot stood near the monitoring equipment, reviewing the previous scene's recording. Margot sighed audibly. Do you believe his improved behavior will continue? Leonardo sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Fundamental character transformation doesn't occur instantaneously. He turned toward her, his expression calm, knowing. But occasionally, individuals change sufficiently. Margot smiled, the accumulated stress from recent days finally diminishing. For the first time since production commenced, she experienced genuine satisfaction with her involvement. As cameras activated again, Margot delivered her most compelling performance yet. The entire production team watched, captivated, even Oliver, positioned behind the monitor, nodded subtly. However, the underlying question persisted unspoken. Would Oliver's behavioral improvement endure? Or did this represent merely another performance? Only subsequent experiences would provide that answer. The production environment had transformed. It hadn't achieved perfection. It hadn't suddenly become an ideal workplace, but conditions had improved, and that improvement sufficed. As weeks progressed, the set's atmosphere evolved gradually. Oliver Smith, though maintaining stringent standards and exacting requirements, had developed emotional restraint. He provided constructive feedback rather than personal humiliation. He challenged his performers, but no longer at the expense of their personal dignity. And Margot, for the first extended period, she rediscovered professional satisfaction. One evening after filming concluded, Margot packed her belongings when a familiar voice interrupted. "Your performance today was exceptional." She turned to discover Oliver standing nearby, hands in pockets. She examined him carefully. "Thank you." Oliver hesitated momentarily before continuing. "My previous statement was sincere. I exceeded reasonable boundaries, nearly sacrificing everything consequently." Margot raised an eyebrow expressively. "Nearly." Oliver displayed a slight smirk. "Let's acknowledge, circumstance favored me." He surveyed the set, where crew members conversed comfortably, laughed, displayed relaxation previously absent. "Without Leonardo's confrontation, without your principled stance, I doubt I would remain in this position currently." Margot crossed her arms thoughtfully. "What happened subsequently? Does this represent the reformed Oliver Smith?" He sighed reflectively. "That remains uncertain, but I'm making genuine efforts." She nodded deliberately. "That represents reasonable expectation." Several days later, Margot reviewed potential future scripts in her trailer. A gentle knock on her door redirected her attention. Leonardo entered, displaying his characteristic knowing smile. "Have you a moment?" She gestured toward a seat. Already anticipating significant discussion. He placed a folder before her. She examined it, reviewing initial pages. Her eyebrows raised questioningly. "New production opportunity?" Leonardo confirmed with a nod, "I've examined the screenplay. Quality appears substantial, and they're interested in both our participation." Margot smiled knowingly. "Another dramatic project or something lighter?" Leonardo chuckled appreciatively. "Elements of both genres." She leaned back, tapping her fingers against the folder contemplatively. "Regarding directorial selection?" Leonardo smiled meaningfully. "Let's acknowledge, selection authority rests with us this time." Margot laughed, shaking her head. For the first time in extended duration, she experienced genuine control regarding her choices, her career trajectory, her professional future. And examining the screenplay, she understood one certainty. Whatever developments followed, she wouldn't enter them with. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoy this video, and learned a lesson. I would be grateful for your likes. Also don't forget to subscribe and comment on the video. See you soon.